the muscle health we've been talking about was Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And again, if you guys don't know who she is, a DO who has really grew her following over the last few years on a lot of different things she's such an expert on. But one of the main ones she likes to talk about is just strength and being strong. And why that should be is her argument that the muscle in our bodies is an organ system.
Yes.
You need to start. You need to start. Yes. You need to start treating it as if it's visceral and important to you. It's not just this thing that moves you. There's so much more to it. Yep. I like that metabolic engine. I love that. And how muscle is earned.
Yes.
But once it's earned, you will have so much thriving into the end of your time as a human if you just take the time to earn it.
Yes.
And the way that she communicates about muscle is just so cool. It's so cool to hear her perspective on how much she appreciates muscle as a part of the body.
And I remember we talked about this at the beginning of the pod, this episode, but the difference between obesity and not having as much muscle, instead of shifting, I got to lose all this weight, just if you focus on building the muscle up, subsequently obesity will improve long term. So
she even argues that we're not in a obesity epidemic, we are in a lack of muscle epidemic. We are sarcopenic.
Yep.
We need way more muscle as humans. And she goes, it's obviously, she goes, we've been focusing on fat for the last 70 years. She goes, how has that been doing for us?
Exactly.
She goes, let's focus on building muscle. And I would only argue that fat problem is going to get much better once we focus on muscle. And I agree with her.
Yeah. Especially from kids too.
Yeah.
To adults.
And it's getting worse in kids. She said that. Yeah. Kids are more obese, have less muscle than they used to, like 35% less, I think, than prior years. Scary.
It is pretty scary. And I know recently she argued, or at least I think it was on Huberman, that sarcopenia is not just, if you look at the definition of muscle loss over time, that in itself could apply to kids.
It is applying to kids.
More often than not, most people think of it as as you age or as you get older, or then you need to start working on it. But now we're seeing that these kids also are having muscle loss and deterioration, increase in fat. So
that's scary.
It is scary. So now that definition is starting to shift a little bit more.
It opens it up. Wow. Yeah.
And she even spoke on, I believe, the DeLauer study that he shared too with the upper limit. We talk about how we used to think it was 30 to 40. Now we know it's upper limits of even 100 at some studies. And she goes, you'll never have to worry about that. She goes, if anything, you need to be getting minimum, I think she said like a 1-to-1 ratio was her ratio.
So.
Upwards of 1.6 even. She's
That's what she's saying.
In pounds, not kilos.
Pounds, not kilos. Definitely not kilos.
Yeah.
I think like the
so, for example, what that means is if you're 150 pounds, you should be eating roughly 150 grams of protein per day. 1.6 would be about that 200 maybe. Yeah.
And didn't she say something about, that you can't necessarily get a lot of the amino acids which are found within the protein that you're trying to consume anyways. A majority has to come from diet supplementation. And then there's a turnover rate, which is why you need it on a daily basis at that rate too.
I like the word she used, which was essential. We talked about that. And how when we think about our macros and we think about our essential nutrients we need to take, we're thinking like vitamins and other things that we think more essential. But when she rerouted the idea that protein is actually what you need to be worried most about as far as an essential intake, that changes everything, because she talked about all the amino acids that are essential and why protein is essential. And I think most people, let me rephrase that. There are individuals who don't like eating meat. It doesn't mean that they're vegetarian or vegan. Some just don't eat a lot of it. They would much prefer to get their calories from pastas and salads, and maybe just they don't like to eat a lot of meat. But what she argued is it's not negotiable. You need to figure out a way to intake that protein. And yes, an easy way to do it is eating a lot of meat. Now, if you want to try to get there without it, she still wants you to do that. But she also then argued animal-based versus plant-based. She had some things to say about that too, but now that's a different conversation. But I think we can still argue, no matter how you get it, you need to be getting it.
100%.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to speak on the anabolic window isn't a panic button?
Yeah, we were talking about that on the way back from the DeLauer talk.
Because you guys have a lot of insight on that.
I asked you, Cory, because I asked you, I said, did he speak about when we should be taking protein. And he had said something about that. And then you want to go into the carb talk of what he talked about too with that? So should we be worried about protein intake during this window that we've known about? Because I remember you talked about the resistance exercise and how it can be pushed out to so long and not needing to worry about that window.
Yeah, most people think 30 minutes you have to have your protein. Now, for carbs, it may be a little bit of a different story, but right here, the Journal of Applied Physiology found, muscle protein synthesis increases rapidly post-exercise, right?
Yes.
When we're in the gym, we're destroying the muscles, we're breaking them down, muscle tissue. So we gotta obviously build that back up so the body starts to produce that. That has increased 50% 4 hours post-exercise. 24 hours post-exercise, muscle protein synthesis increases to 109%, which is pretty crazy.
What it means is we're still building at that time.
Anabolic
Yes.
mode.
There's no window an hour after a workout. Yes. We have plenty of time.
In fact, 36 hours to roughly around, I think it was within 14% of baseline, which, I mean, kind of means that the anabolic window is a little bit larger, a lot bit larger than we typically thought. 30 minutes to an hour, you got to get your protein. Yes. Actually, I have a day because at a day, it's a little over 100% increase. So that is super cool. Kind of contradicts what most people think in this space. But as long as your daily 24-hour protein needs are met, then you should be good. You don't really have to focus on, again, going back to if you're fasting or something, you can eat 100 grams just like that. So regardless of when it is, after you work out, as long as you're, there shouldn't be that fear there. As long as you're getting your daily protein intake, should be good, which should be like at least 1-to-1 ratio, if not more.
So do you also want to talk on resistance exercise and carbohydrate utilization?
Yeah.
Because that, when he brought that up, I was...
Man, so this was super cool right here. So let's say your muscle has at least 25% glycogen. So I don't know, maybe you did some exercise in the morning or something, you're moving around a lot, moving stuff. You have about 25% of your glycogen. That really won't affect your performance too much, which I thought was pretty interesting because usually I try to eat carbs before I work out, like most people, and then go work out and all that stuff. But greater than 25% does not affect performance. So if you have more than 25% glycogen in your muscles, it doesn't really affect performance that much compared to just 25%. So that was super cool. And then intra-workout, so during your workout, if you take carbs or ingest carbohydrates while you're working out, you're not gonna get that insulin spike. In fact, I didn't tell you guys this, intra-workout or during, plus immediately after exercise up to 2 hours. Carbohydrate intake does not require insulin to pull glucose into the muscle.
So not just during, but after.
Not just during, but up to 2 hours. I didn't know that either until I was going through my notes last night.
So just so everyone
That's
knows,
cool.
what Cory's saying is when we ingest carbohydrates, and in that 2-hour window, it sounds like, during resistance training, we don't need insulin to utilize carbohydrates. And that's effective because insulin, we always want to try to not use insulin. The more we have to use insulin, they've shown, is what decreases longevity. So when we can hack our insulin receptors, that's going to push us out. So the fact is that we will ingest and use that carbohydrate in that 2-hour window without the need of insulin. That's phenomenal.
It's pretty crazy. And in fact, there was a question that I think Thomas DeLauer got about this where assuming, let's say you're on a keto diet or carnivore, where you're really not getting a lot of carbs naturally, or in your diet at least, if you want to introduce carbs, to be able to flip that switch from fat to carbs, to be able to have the metabolic flexibility, if you will, you can take carbs, I don't know, in a solution or a drink or maybe a little snack or something during your workout, and you won't get that insulin spike that you're trying to avoid if you're trying to stay in ketosis. Now, you're going to temporarily be knocked out of ketosis just given the fact that there's going to be carbs flowing through you, but mostly due to the movement itself of exercise, plus metabolic activation of what is AMPK, signaling those GLUT4 receptors to then start pulling in glucose to the muscles. Super cool stuff.
Basically, a very effective way to when you should consume your carbs. Yeah. It'd be a great way to add that into your daily schedule when you are doing resistance training.
Yeah, and according
To the Journal of Nutrients, 49 studies they looked at, pre-workout carbs are not essential for strength, performance, or muscle growth. Really? Yeah. So that kind of goes against what I always thought. I always try to eat carbs before I go work out.
So did that, honestly, carb loading then, is that just prior to? 24 to 48 hours prior to, maybe that's not quite the study.
No.
But just prior to, it definitely doesn't make it.
Yep, let's say I have a bowl of oatmeal 30 minutes an hour before I go work out, whatever it is. Yeah, I didn't do a deep dive into that one, but it looks like an analysis where they looked at 49 total studies. Yeah, pre-workout carbs basically didn't equate to increased strength performance or muscle growth.
You don't need to hit that bowl of spaghetti before leg day.
I would argue that because if, let's say, you have a big event the next day or a lifting meet or something, you do want to maximize your glycogen stores to have as much energy as possible. Long-term, 24-hour maybe carb loading would be good if you have a big, you're gonna exert a lot of energy using carbs, race or something. Yeah, then you would want to eat a lot of carbs. But if you're going to the gym every day and you're like me trying to eat carbs before then, according to the study, you don't necessarily have to have that for strength performance or muscle growth, assuming you have at least 25% glycogen stores that Thomas DeLauer was talking about, or else performance will be affected. So that was pretty crazy.
I feel like we're starting to get very dialed in and specific more with performance medicine as more of these studies have come out. We're starting to learn a lot more of the myths. A lot of what we thought about now are myths. And they're changing like that very quickly every day.
Coding.
And bodybuilders now versus bodybuilders back then, probably
story.
completely different understanding of their nutrition and health compared to now. It's crazy. Yeah, that's pretty much what we have on her. We obviously spoke a little bit about Thomas DeLauer too.